President Jacob Zuma's lawyers have withdrawn their services. It's less than a month before his corruption trial begins. It also comes hot on the heels of a Supreme Court of Appeal ruling which found Zuma isn't entitled to state funds for legal fees in the matter. He's been ordered to pay back 25 million rand already incurred during previous proceedings. That just adds to some of the political stories that have developed today. I'm joined now by political analyst Dirk Kotze to unpack some of these issues. Professor Kotze, good evening and thank you so much for your time tonight. Firstly, let's just start with the developments around this issue of step aside. Already we're seeing movements that are signaling that provinces are beginning to implement part of this resolution. What are you anticipating is going to be the response, and do you foresee a successful implementation of this by the end of April?
Well, I think my prediction is that it will not be necessarily so neat and clean and easy to implement it. We know that there's a real pushback against it, right from the top, from President Zuma's side, although he's not directly involved in this, Ace Magashule and others. What we've also now seen lately, and what you've mentioned earlier on in the introduction, of at least two very senior persons in the ANC who are not necessarily part of the step aside decision, but who have been found guilty or by their provincial executive committees and disciplinary committees. And they indicated that they are not going to accept it and will appeal against it. So I think one cannot really expect, realistically speaking, that it's simply going to accept it as it is. And there's going to be a lot of contestation. But that's not new. I think this is something we have become used to, and therefore it is expected that persons are going to fight for their positions, because this is not only a political position. For many people, it's their way of life. It is their form of income, their existence that's at stake, really.
And that's really the question, because when one looks at some of these cases, at least from the outside looking in, one of the questions, of course, is that, is it really worth the effort of getting lawyers, fighting these cases, having to go through what is very much a public process? And I think at the end of the day, nobody really ever comes out of it looking in the best light. And so, what's at stake for these individuals if they just accept what the party has said and effectively just, I suppose, go back to the benches of the party?
Yes, that is ideally speaking what should happen, but for most people they don't really have these options. The stakes are very high for them. Most people don't have necessarily a profession that they can go back to, and that would have been actually the ideal situation, that our public representatives are in parliament or at provincial or local level only for a certain period and don't see it as a lifelong career. But unfortunately, in many countries of the world, especially developing countries where there are not so many economic options necessarily, politics is actually the entry point into the economy and to other forms of livelihoods. And that, I think, is what they all want to protect, because if they are stepping down from these positions, then for many people they are actually in the political sort of desert, in the political wilderness, and that will be the end for them. And that, I think, is what is the big what they are fighting against, is the sense of that they are going to be marginalized or isolated or pushed out of politics in general.
I want us to look at the situation in the Northwest, where Supra Mahomapelu's future in the ANC there, of course, seems to be on shaky ground. He's always been seen as a figure that wields significant influence in that province. The fact that the ANC there has suspended him, what is the likely impact of that?
Well, it's very significant for the politics and the dynamics of Northwest Province and the ANC there. I think one should first start by saying that his leadership came to an end when this interim task team or interim provincial leadership has been appointed, and that goes back to 2019 after the election. It also introduced Job Magoro as the new premier. And it was seen as a way of trying to deal with the factional fighting within the province over quite some period already. One can also remind oneself that, I mean, this was referred to as one of the provinces of the Premier League, together with the Free State and Mpumalanga. And it's quite a coincidence at the moment that all three of them are really not in a stable position. In the case of the Free State, there was recently a court judgment that set aside the outcome of the 2017 provincial conference. As well as in Mpumalanga, there hasn't been a leadership really since 2017, when the current deputy president, David Mabuza, was elected as the ANC's deputy president, and there was no successor for him. So they are now in the process of trying to stage a new provincial conference. But it's sort of incidental, I would say, that all three of those of the Premier League provinces actually had some problems in the post-2017 situation to stabilize themselves in terms of provincial leadership.
Are we likely to see the individuals now who are, whether by way of the step-aside resolution or just by decisions of those committees, who are being told to step down from whatever positions that they have, or who are facing disciplinary action, are we likely to see them coalescing around each other and forming some kind of grouping that will then be part of effectively a fight back of sorts?
I don't necessarily expect that. What one can possibly expect is those who are in the category of those that must step aside by the end of the month, that they might have a sort of a common interest or common purpose. Those, the two who have now been announced today, are in very different situations. For example, the MEC Masuku, or former MEC Masuku of Gauteng, and Suprema Mopelo, they don't really share a lot of interest. And therefore, I don't expect them, for example, to come together. Or the former spokesperson of President Ramaphosa for also. So I think what is a common aspect amongst them is that they feel that they have been treated unfairly, and they have articulated that also, and that they will, but not jointly, but in their individual cases, will try to challenge that. But I think there is a coalescence in the sense of the initiative from the NEC with the stepping aside, the 30 days, is in a sense has activated or served as a catalyst for the provinces also now to act more in similar vein. And I think it's all, I'm speculating, but I think it has maybe to do with the fact that we are getting closer and closer to the National General Council. There's lots of branch meetings taking place in order to identify the delegates for that. And that is seen as potentially a very important moment for the ANC with respect to the current leadership and the current internal dynamics in the ANC. So I think it's interpreted as an important moment, and therefore there's a heightened attention given to what is happening at local level as well as provincial level.
Political analyst Dirk Kotze, let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for your time on News at Prime.